Good morning. Good morning. This begins our official month of writing, and I'm very excited. And I'm all set here with my pen and paper, and I feel like this month of writing is going to be so helpful to making August a real month of contemplation and getting ready for the new academic year. I think of September as the new year. And we're so happy to have Julian Miller with us. We He came a couple of years ago, and everybody on the planning committee said, "Oh, let's see if Julian will come back and do writing with us." And this morning he's going to do poetry um, and how focusing and poetry go together so naturally. Um, and Julian's book is available and it's in the bio, and I suggested putting the name of it in the chat also. And let's begin. Hi, Julian. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Lynn. And hi, everybody. So what I've been thinking about this time around is, since I am a poet, is how poetry and focusing are very similar. And in a way, they're similar phenomena. Languages are essential form of communication, but the problem with normal language, it's that it's basically generic. And therefore it can also be a hindrance to deep communication. It's a functional way to exchange ideas and to perform tasks, but it's limited in other areas. And focusing is a language beneath language, a way to perceive without the limitations of words. And what focusing does is create a certain kind of universe that you can inhabit. There was a scientist, his name is Benjamin Whorf. He was a linguist. And he basically theorized that the language that you speak creates the world that you see. The universe that you see is created by the language that you speak.
Wow.
Well, focusing creates a different way of looking at experience. The language that you can't speak, the language that's there and you can sense it, but it's hidden and it's not accessible to words, at least not in the beginning. But as I said, language shapes our perception of reality. So focusing also shapes our perception of reality. It's sort of a negative quote, but Nietzsche said, anyone who spends time looking into the abyss must remember that that's time that the abyss spends looking into her or him. So I'm not saying that any of this is an abyss, but you're really influenced by the way you conceive of your reality. And focusing changes your reality and says that there's a much larger field of reference that you can be privy to if you just kick the language habit and try to sense into what's there underneath the language. And that really changes the way you look at the world and you look at yourself. Becoming aware of an experience before you need to describe it is an amazing phenomenon, and it changes everything. Can you write without using language? Well, of course you can't. But the experience that compels or inspires that language can be something fresh and original. The field of understanding of the writer shapes her response to that experience. The steps of clearing a space in a felt sense and preverbal in a felt shift alters how the experiencer sees the world and how she responds to it. Poetry is the art and craft of using language in a new way. in a sense, a poet always wants to reinvent language. There are many aspects of how poetry works. The part that intrigues me the most is the use of metaphor. A metaphor is a way of describing something that you actually can't describe in words, but you find a way obliquely to intimate what the experience is like. And that gives you a description of something that is sort of indescribable. The idea of poetry is to share an experience and impart it to the reader so that he or she also has a new version of experience. There are many ways in which a poem elevates and transforms who you are and how you feel, because you're stepping into someone else's reality. Just as in focusing, you're actually stepping into your own new version of reality. And I guess for all of us, what's your objective in writing? Well, it's to perceive yourself in a new way and to have that perception witnessed in some way. And witnessing is very important, both in focusing and poetry. So I'm going to read you a poem. And you can listen for either what the felt sense is for you when you hear it, or what the metaphors are that describe an experience that is basically not that describable. This poem is called Each Day. Each day you begin another circle around the sun. Give thanks with an open heart. You, a splash of light off God's forehead. Look beyond the naked corpse of your suffering. Shrug off all dark burdens of memory. Give thanks for all those who have accompanied you on your journey, for their love, their tears, their admiration, their dismay, for how they have twined their lives with yours, even for those who have thwarted and diminished you, even for those who resent you and wish you ill. Their shadows are the nature of companionship. Recall the silence of the forest, the way the light paints pools of amber light on moss and meadow. Along the shore, the ocean sibilants as a whispered heartbeat. Look around you. There is nothing not part of your journey. This path, one foot then another. Notice how you stumble, how your knees and ankles falter, beg you to rest by the side of the road. Notice the falling, a pause, a long sigh. Notice the getting up. Perhaps a far horizon is the place you thought you'd be. Time now for the short view. The leaves are breathing you. The sky comforts you with a diaphanous embrace. The trees extend their long brown arms. Take another breath. This air is shared with every living thing. Like it or not, you are part of the conspiracy of the living. Water and earth, flame and shadow, rain falling, wet tears, years plummeting, dark soil pierced with sunlight and rising green spires. In this universe, if you shed your armor, love will find a way to find you. Even here, every child needs no reason for delight. A gust of wind wafts each moment into the next. Pools of light and shadow. Come on, one foot, then another.
Wow. Wow.
So, well, I don't know if any of you want to give feedback on what felt sense you got out of that, if anything. Did you? Were you there through the whole thing? Did the imagery speak to you in any way? Did it not speak to you? Oh, the whole idea in writing a poem is to, I forget, somebody said, a poem is how you speak to yourself in a language that you didn't know you had. A poem is how you reveal things to yourself that couldn't be revealed in another way. So we're going to do writing today, which
Julian, maybe we need just to pause to see how to express what the poem did.
Wow. It was beautiful.
'Cause we can't use the regular language, right, to express it.
Thank you, Julian, for sharing your poem. Sophie here. I resonated with the way nature can hold us in our journey and suffering, and the way it can show me the larger picture and also hope. It's beautiful poem. Thank you. Really would love you to share it on the chat. Would love to read it again.
okay, I'll send it out afterwards to everybody.
Thank you.
I think it was a call for happiness.
How can you find out?
Certain lines you used, like, come on. Look how you're connected. Look how everything is on the same journey as you. You're special, but you are part of the universe, something like that. It was call to happiness is enough to say for me, I think. Call to happiness.
Yes, speak up. I think you're muted.
Shall we just speak up, or who are we talking?
I
Liz,
had trouble with the poem. It was in the imperative, so it's giving me orders. It's telling me how to live. It's conceptual. It's ideas. It's experience distant. It's kind of like something you have heard a lot before. I didn't have a great reaction to it. To me, it was like the opposite of a focusing attitude. To me, you couldn't get less of a focusing attitude than this poem.
because it was telling you what to do.
Yeah, I felt it as giving me instructions on how to live. And my felt sense was, ooh, I think I'm doing it all wrong, according to this person.
Wow.
And it was something I felt like I had to love the poem, and then people had to respond that, oh, it was so beautiful. But I felt that it was not allowing me to live my own wild life, or whatever that other cliche poem is that everybody reads all the time.
Well,
Anyway,
yeah.
sorry, I didn't want to say it, but I always have this
I'm so
struggle.
glad you said it.
Should I be real or should I go with the crowd? That's always my problem. But I'll take William Carlos Williams over this person any day with his
Well, at least
plums
you
or
chose a
whatever.
really good person to take over my poem.
But can I ask you, Julian, what's your reaction to what I'm saying? It's like,
I can see how you can take that. A, a suggestion can be taken as an imperative or as uh, a suggestion or as one way to look at interpret the world. However, you will get a lower rating than other people during this program because you didn't like my poem. No, I'm just joking.
That's the problem because
Yeah, I know.
there's the poem and then it's you picked the poem, right? So if
Right.
we want to go from experience distant of the poem to, someone named Julian Miller chose a poem. And so I need to like the poem because, so it's just hard, It's just
As much
hard.
as you may not believe it, I'm not taking this personally, Liz.
Oh, I don't know what that means. That's
It
not in
means
my world.
my feelings aren't well, my feelings are hurt, obviously, but they're not. Everyone has their own response. The
Right.
only thing I would bring up with this is what are your rules for living a full and deep and rich life?
I have no rules. I'm not a rules person. I was raised to be a rules person and I decided it wasn't the way I want to go.
So, what is it that guides you?
Do I have to have something external that guides me?
You don't have to have, no, you don't even have to answer the question.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that question itself is a thing.
Yes, most of my questions are things. I don't know how to do non-thingified questions, but I'll work
Okay.
on it. Someone else, yeah?
Yeah. Hi, Julian. Are you asking what else to Liz or to general?
No, in general,
In
to
general.
the poem.
Okay. Yeah, and I wanted to just say hello to Liz. I was really struck by when Lynn created the pause to answer the unknown. It was like that witness. So it's perceive yourself in a new way and have yourself witnessed. And I experienced the poem as the new language, and I really loved it. Love is the word that I won't want to use, but it was something more than us, and that it was a reminder or an echo from the language of something else deeper in me, and I opened myself to it totally and loved it. A poem is speaking in a language I didn't know I had, so I'm responding in a language that I don't know I have, but the felt sense is just warm and mushy and lovely. So thank you, Jillian. And yeah.
So I'm
Marianne?
not,
I have something. I found many of the lines evocative of unity, but I needed pauses because I was just beginning to have a felt sense, and then it continued. So eventually I became frustrated because there wasn't enough time for me to settle into any one evocation within me. So there's power there. There's power in the poem, but I felt that I was denied the full experience because it was so quick.
That's a really good point. And sometimes reading a poem is a better way to get the depth of it and get a felt sense of each aspect of it than hearing it. Although hearing it embodied is also a different kind of way of taking in the experience. I always feel with poetry, it's too rushed for a lot of people because the images come too fast, and if you're not experienced with them, you can't really palpate them properly. You can't let the sense of it come into you.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's kind of like my experience watching basketball games. It's moving through quickly. I can't I can't follow it. It reminds me of, I think, David White, when he's reading poetry, he repeats each line,
Right.
and that kind of slows down. The end of the poem kind of put me right into an experience of nature that I sometimes have, where the lines of "you're not at the far horizon where you thought you might be," something like that, which in my experience was kind of like my default kind of conceptual thinking. And then the metaphors of, you know, the body reaching, the tree has limbs, you know, and it's reaching out. And that reminded me of being in nature, and not necessarily in a good way. I'm not talking about the poem, I'm talking about my experience in nature, of sometimes feeling kind of claustrophobic or limited, or like, okay, just being in the present moment sometimes can feel claustrophobic to me, like my mind wants to race to the far horizon. So I just found that evocative.
So Julian, I'm going to jump in and let you know that you have shifted me in a way that all my life I've been searching to somehow relate to poetry, feeling always frustrated. And what you introduced me to is this concept of, it's a language that I didn't even know I had. I was always tuning into the language of the poet instead of trying to be sensitive that it's a language that they are producing that they didn't know even had as they were writing the poem. So it was life transforming for me. And Lynn, I never liked poetry. But when it came up for you, I said, Lynn knows what she's doing. If she's introducing someone who is going to somehow combine felt sense and poetry, let me stay curious. And I don't have enough words to say what I feel right now is an opening, to know that there is a possibility of this kind of what landed for me, a dialogue between my unconscious that does not yet have words, and relate to it and allow it to kind of bubble forth and let my consciousness listen to it in a way that it has not yet heard. So for me, this has been life transforming. So thank you both, Lynn and Julian.
Wow, thank you.
Yes. Wow.
Wow. Wow. Wow. I'm glad to witness that.
Yes, me too. It's like you got it.
Yeah.
Like in that scene with Helen Keller, when she gets that there's a word, and when she's doing the sign language for water, it's like you got it. My partner hates poetry, absolutely hates it, makes her very angry. And, you know, I tried to be open to her experience and say, well, what is it? And she said, it doesn't make sense. It teases you. And it reminds her of being a child and being teased by her older sisters. And I think that poetry does tease you, because you can't think about it in the ordinary way. Even what you were saying, Gray, about it goes too fast. It's like you can't be in the ordinary way. You have to let it wash over you, and as you put it, you know, your unconscious is listening and having its own reaction, its own language.
Can I relate
Are we
I'm
raising
sorry.
our hands, or what? How's this working?
Go ahead.
Or is everybody's just jumping in? Is that how it works?
No, Ray, you could raise your hand.
Oh, I have been raising my hand for a while, but
Go ahead,
I
Charles.
just wondering how we're doing it.
Try jumping in, Charles.
It's fine.
Great.
It's fine for Liz to speak if she wants to. I just not sure if I should be waiting to be called on, or
No, go ahead, Charles. You've been waiting.
Okay. Well, very briefly, I do agree with people who say that kind of the images were hard to, they went quickly and they were hard to absorb. So I kind of let them wash over me. And the one that kind of landed for me was the one about the air. And I felt like in that moment, when you, there was some sense that we're all sharing the same air. And I almost felt like for me, that was almost the essence of in some way of the poem, that we share the same air, the same space. And it brought me into that connection in a new way, in a fresh way, that we're all occupying together and using and breathing the same space, the same air, the same world. And that was the main thing that the poem did for me. There were many other images, and each of them was slightly evocative, but I think I would need to read the poem to take the time to take in the rest of it. That's all I wanted to say.
June, you wanted to say something? Your microphone is muted.
Yes. I just want to give a pause to what Charles just said. That was quite a lot and very good. That first line, around the sun, you know, I mean, I just was there. I thought the poem was beautiful, very evocative, gave me experiences. But even, I mean, that first sentence, I was already up there and around the sun, and I just followed the poem wherever it went. It was really beautiful. I loved it. Thank you.
I'd like to say something around what Lynn calls the dynamic of what is happening in the form of a response right now, which is multicolored, and there's a great variety of experiences that we're apparently all individually having and collectively also. It makes me, you know, because I'm being nourished by a lot of information, and brings me back to what I like to bring forth usually when we're in groups, is that there's a phrase that apparently is well known in English. It says, "Don't shoot the messenger." And another way to say it is that any kind of stimulus cannot be made responsible for our own personal reaction.
Right.
And that's interesting, because every time we react, we're only talking about ourselves. We're not talking about the stimuli, the stimulus itself. And poetry, like any form of art, offers us an opportunity. It's a stimulation that guides us, or guides me, back within my own implicit experience of the interaction I have with life. You know, so what Julian offered us with his poem is a trigger that brings me back to myself and see how I am right now with what I'm hearing. So if I don't suit the messenger, if I don't believe that the stimulus is responsible for how I feel, I'm making my own reaction. I'm making myself feel something about that form of stimulation. And something that Liz said a little bit earlier that I found really interesting is she was talking, at least I interpreted that she was talking about the way the poem was read. You know? And somebody else said that, I think it's Cassell, or said it was going really fast. So I would be interested, I don't know if it would be a good exercise, I would be interested to hear Julian reread it again, but from his felt sense, connected, really feeling the words rather than reading them. I believe that would also be another kind of stimulation, and we'll have a different experience from it, probably. I don't know. It's, the words I'm using, the speed that I'm having, the intonation that I'm having. If I use another one, the effect won't be the same. If I start shouting, you won't experience the same thing. But it won't be about me. It would be about how we react to any kind of stimulation. So I like poetry. I didn't really relate to poetry before, but beginning to like poetry because I believe I'm offering myself a little bit more opportunities to like myself more also through different stimulation, either music or poetry. It's an opportunity to see where I am and how I let, let's say, newness in. So I usually protect myself and don't let everything come in. So poetry is an opportunity now for me to just let it in and see what happens, and probably not choose any phrases. And like Charles said, that maybe one aspect will do something to me or bring me to a certain place within myself. So I'm really curious about how everybody responding to the poetry and how it talks about ourselves, in fact. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Nikhil. And
I would welcome a
we're-
rereading. That just to put my 2 cents in.
go ahead, Charles. What did you say?
Just I would welcome a rereading, possibly more pausefully. Yeah, I would welcome
Now,
that.
I'm thinking.
Mikhail, you said that we make ourselves feel, it is about relationship as well, I can't find the words to express how what you said I made myself feel in relation. I like the idea that we're real, I like that Julian is extending something of an experience without words, but I'm explaining, I'm talking to you with words, and they're English words. But if I was playful and sensual, I would like to be felt as well. So I think that we're not isolated. I think that we do connect in some medium, and it might not be poetry, it might be something else, like sex or something good like that. So
Poetry and
I
sex.
like to think that I would be a good cause to create a good effect.
Poetry and sex, are those your only recommendations, Pauline?
Someone said about sex. What? Say that again. Was that you, Julian?
I thought you said something about poetry and sex are the only good ways to have a connection with other people.
Well, they're two good ways. Maybe there are other ones, but we've
ways.
identified two this day. It's lovely. Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else have? This has been incredibly revelatory, and what a wide range of responses you've all had.
Well, I'd love to copy and paste like the first half of what Michelle said. Thank you. And about our I'll change it up a bit to the radio station that we're on. Personally, the poetry hits it, and then it comes back out as the response. I only heard one line. I heard the whole poem, but the one line that really spoke to me was, all of the phenomena that exist in our lives, including the people that wish us ill. And I was like, yes, this is great, because that those moments or times when I don't wish someone well and feel kind of terrible about that, and this was very permission-y, so thank you. It gives it space in life to have those feelings.
Hmm.
Can I bring up the subject of poetry trauma?
Wait a minute. Liz, let's see how this conversation sort of can pull together. And if you bring up a new subject, I
Certainly.
think it might,
Certainly.
yes, might go astray.
Astray
Yeah.
into trauma, poetry trauma. You could
Poetry
really go
trauma.
astray into that. That's very true.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
that is a background, though. Whenever we talk about poetry, I think poetry trauma is a background for that discussion. Just like talking about spirituality or talking about art. I mean, many of us have been traumatized and in these areas, and feel like this. I think you're talking about, Liz, this feeling like you're supposed to have this reaction or that reaction, and you're supposed to.
I'm still resonating with your partner saying she feels tricked.
Yes,
I
yes,
got
yes.
stuck there and I went
Teased.
someplace
Yes,
in my
yes,
history. So,
yes,
and I don't think I'm the only one.
yes. I think that maybe we could even have a show of hands of people who have some kind of feeling like a poetry trauma, that you're supposed to have you're supposed to understand it in a certain way, or you're supposed to have a certain reaction.
Well, it's presented as pretty. It's poetry is very tricky. You can't be negative about poetry because
Yeah, and that's part of and that's very much like those other subjects also. I know for me, I can feel that way, that they're poems that I just don't understand. And then I somehow liberated myself to say, if there's one line, or even if there isn't one line, that the felt sense of the whole thing is an opportunity to have a new experience. But there is, and you speak for this quite a bit, Liz, this feeling of the bullying of certain kinds of culture that say to be a good person, an intelligent person, or whatever sense that you're supposed to react this way.
well, when I was in college, we had to analyze poems in freshman English, and I didn't know what the hell they were about. Wallace Stevens, I remember. And then I remembered that people said, "Oh, you could interpret a poem any way you want." And so I thought, okay. And I came in with my work, and the teacher, and this was in an elite girls' college, in the 1960s, and the teacher just shut me down and said I was completely wrong, in front of a whole class of girls, many of whom went to elite New York City private schools and boarding schools all around the country, and had had a whole lifetime of poetry, and I did not. And my brother-in-law was getting a PhD in English literature at Berkeley. And I called him up and I said, "What the fuck does this poem mean, Michael?" And from then on, every time we had poems, I called him up and said, "Tell me what the goddamn poem means." And he basically on the phone wrote the paper for me. And then I got good grades. So, this is all of this beauty of poetry to me is more like, elite. It's just another side of it. They tell you that you can feel how you feel, but they're lying.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that says something about a background feeling that some people have in any kind of discussion of poetry, and maybe all of us have in some kind of way.
And any discussion of writing in general.
Yeah, yeah.
There's any creative art has a mixture of an egocentric entity and someone who desperately wants to be seen and liked and wants to share an experience in a new way with other people. it doesn't always work. There are many poems that I've read that that I feel are selfish. And some people may feel that about some of mine, but the idea is you're trying to extend yourself out so that you're seen and so that your experience is shared in some way, in a novel way with other people. It doesn't always work. Just the way in writing, it doesn't always work. What you write and how you describe something is not always accessible to other people, but you have to find some balance of being true to yourself and what your experience is, and being able to communicate with other people so that you're not invisible or incomprehensible. And I think poetry is just one example of that attempt to be less lonely and to be seen and to find some way to elevate an experience for somebody else. So, and certainly the responses you've all given cover the whole spectrum of that particular phenomenon.
And what comes up for me is the variety, what we bring right here amongst us, and that's life in general, because, for example, it really resonated for me the way you read your poem, because you wrote it. When you emphasize certain words, it was you who emphasized whatever was going for you, at least at that moment again, as you were reading the poetry. And it so opened me up to you as a person. So when I read a poem, I can even try to stay open to what the person is like that's writing it. And this is coming from somebody, Liz, who had poetry trauma. But my vision for myself is to always stay open and curious. What happened, happened. And moving forward, how can I figure out another way of showing up that maybe, just maybe, I didn't fully figure it out before? For me to show up to this meeting, Lynn, is because I trusted that I will learn something here. And it's all about my learning about myself, always when I come to your offerings. And this is no different. So I just want to let you know, I loved the way you read it. It got me to know you energetically, the way you emphasize the words, the speed with which you read it. It was just, for me personally, perfection. So there you go. Another perspective.
You know, Jacob Pinsky, the poet in Boston University, said there are many different versions of how you hear or experience a poem, but when the person who wrote it reads it, it gets embodied in a totally different way. And when you read it on the page, you don't know what the body is trying to tell you, because you can't hear the voice of the person who created it. Now, there are some poets who are wonderful poets. When they read their poetry, their voices go flat and they become kind of disembodied, or they get sing-song. And that's another issue. But all of this is ways that we as poets or as writers are trying to communicate ourselves to other people.
I'd like to hear it again, right?
I could certainly do that. I feel I wanted you to try a writing sample, and
Yes, I think we might not have enough time. I would love to hear you read it again also, but I think that we might not have enough time to have the experience of writing and then coming back and talking about the experience.
Lynn, could I say something before?
Sure, of course.
I just loved, Julian, when you talked about, if I heard it right, that the writer, a poet is, or a writer is less lonely in the act of writing. I really experienced that. It's a few places, where I can count on that, of being less lonely. And I find that, I'm not sure what it's about, but something about you get connected with yourself. And then for me, to bring in my experience, Julian, of you reading your poem, I feel like I'm less lonely too, because I'm invited into your world in a very special way. So I'm really glad, when it came up, should I read your poem or should you read that you chose to read your own poem, because it's a different way of being invited in. And I don't always catch things, just the way I process. It's like I don't have a memory. I always have to see a poem afterwards. And yes, I remember a few images, but the main feeling is that I'm invited into your world in a very special way. Thank you.
Just the way you witness someone when they're having a felt sense and you're repeating what's going on with them. It's really important to be witnessed in your life in some way.
Mhm.
That,
Yeah.
It's like you're reaching out for a hug, Julian.
That's always true. Maybe we're all reaching out for a hug, but yes.
Yes.
So
Julian, I just learned that you wrote the poem. I am so sorry. I would never have said any of that if I had known that.
well, I'm glad you were liberated enough to say what you said.
Ah,
Give an honest
I feel
appraisal.
horrible. I didn't know you wrote the poem. It was a wonderful poem. I loved it. It was the best poem I've ever heard in my life.
And now Liz is reaching out for a hug.
Thank you for saying that. I believe you in both cases. So, Lynn, do you want to try a writing exercise in the
Yes, absolutely.
time we have left?
I'm all ready. Yeah, we have time for people to have 15 or 20 minutes to write, and you're going to give us a prompt.
Yes, I'm going to give you a prompt because, well, it's a helpful way. It's an accelerated way to get to a particular topic, and it's not really obligatory in any way. It's just a way to focus, if you'll forgive the expression, your attention. And what I'm going to ask you to do is just have a piece of paper and a pencil and do free writing. And free writing means that once you put the pen on the paper, you just keep writing. And if you can't think of anything else to write about, you write, I can't think of anything else to write about. What am I doing? But you just keep writing for it's going to be 5 minutes, which is a short amount of time and an incredibly long amount of time, depending on where you are in your life. So the prompt is a time when a door opened in your life and something meaningful or surprising happened. A time when a door opened in your life and something meaningful or surprising happened. And take a moment before you start writing to just sit there and get a felt sense, if you like, of what that prompt brings up for you, where it wants to go. Maybe the first thing that comes to you is not the thing that you want to write about. And remember, when you're writing, you can go anywhere. This is not about good writing. This is about connecting to the essence of that particular experience. So again, a time when a door opened in your life and something meaningful or surprising happened. So we're not going to break into smaller groups, but I'm going to give you, I'll tell you after 5 minutes have passed.
Okay, that's 5 minutes.
So take an extra minute to finish up what you're writing. Okay, so you should finish up the sentence that you're working on. And now we're going to go into breakout rooms, 3 people in each breakout room. Anybody not yet finished? And the protocol in the breakout room is 3 people, A, B, and C, decide who's A, who's B, who's C. A reads her work, and the other 2 people take a moment to take in what she's written and then describe your felt sense of what happened to you when you heard that work. Then B reads hers, and the other 2 people talk about what it felt like to hear that work. And then C reads hers, and the other 2 people give their response, their felt set response to what happened to them. It's not about the writing, it's about what happened to you when you heard the writing.
We'll see you all in 15 minutes.
So about 5 minutes per person. That is,
Mhm.
one person reads, the other 2 respond, that's 5 minutes. Second person reads, the other 2 respond. 5 minutes. Any other
Great.
questions?
Yeah.
So yeah, people are coming back. I could
Yes.
be wrong about this.
Welcome back, everybody. What was it like to talk about the writing? Welcome back.
Spontaneity, it was, and it is extremely exciting, in fact. It was playful, comprehensible incomprehensibility. It was
Oh, I love that. Comprehensible incomprehensibility.
paradoxes. It was beautiful. Thank you, Julian, for that.
I think
I'm
that's
so
what a
glad.
poem is,
so glad it
right?
worked. What's that?
A poem is comprehensible incomprehensibility in a way.
Yes, that's
It
right.
almost captures what a poem is.
And what was it like reading your piece and having other people witness it?
We found out we needed to read it twice, and that really did it.
Yeah.
I was surprised when I read, I ended up reading. And what surprised me is I thought I had just written like a stream of consciousness journal entry. And it turned out that as I read it, it actually felt like it had poetry. It was and it had a lot more in it than my self-judging mind had thought was in it.
I'm so glad some of the poetry leaked into you.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating this whole session, Julian.
Oh, thank you.
It was very helpful for me, that you gave a prompt. I'm not sure I don't know because I didn't try the other way. And your encouragement to keep writing no matter what. Because there was that sputtering at the beginning. Oh no, I can do it. And then as I said, no, we are continuing with it's amazing the flood of that, again, unconscious communication to my consciousness to witness what my unconscious is ready to share was really very satisfying.
I found this whole session very, very rich. The whole conversation, your poem, and the opportunity to write and read. Yeah, when I have a thing about writing poetry. I have a yearning for it, and then I have something that shuts me down. An inner critic tells me that I can't do it, which is why I came here. Because I knew that as someone who focuses, I have an avenue, and it's really the only avenue where I can feel okay to write. And I actually write not to really communicate with anybody, and I really wanted to bring this up. I don't really write to communicate something. As I wrote, I discovered new things that I didn't really know myself. And so it was a journey for me to experience directly something. Maybe I knew it cerebrally, like cognitively, but I didn't know it at an experiential level. And that's what writing in this way, I wouldn't have called what I wrote a poem, but it was free writing. And I experienced things that I hadn't before in a more direct way. And I really, really appreciate that so much. I have no care for someone to know about it. And then when I read my my piece, my writing, I had to pause at times because it was so deep that it moved me to tears, and I didn't want to cry as I was reading it, but so I touched something deep inside through my writing, which is what I know is possible. But it's like I need a forum like this. And so thank you.
Well, thank you. That was a beautiful description. It sounded like you wrote to manifest. You weren't writing for someone. You were manifesting yourself to yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
What a wonderful thing to do.
It reminds me of what you were saying before, Julian, about how this different use of language, this other language, helps you to step into another world. And it's another world of yourself or of the universe that you inhabit. Almost transformational in some kind of way.
It was really a great experience to be with my trio. And one of the things that I really appreciated is to hear each person's response and each person manifestation in this moment about this prompt. And that always feels so rich when it gets to it's personal, really. I understand. I understand better the world when I can hear the personal in each person. So.
Jean talked about, and other people have talked about, how the more personal and unique and specific and private a communication is, the more universal it is. And that's so true in poetry.
Could you say that again, Lynn, please?
The more personal and unique and quirky and individual a communication is, the more universal it is.
Thank you.
I thought of that because of Sophie saying that she can learn and step into that world with the very personal.
Yeah, I loved what Sophie said. And I was busy writing that down and I missed what you and I wanted to hear Jean's kind of understanding too, agreement with that. Thank you.
Muriel Rukeyser said, the universe is not made up of atoms, it's made up of stories.
Oh, yes.
And each of us is a particular unique collection of stories. and and stepping into them and having them perceived by others and sharing them is a wonderful way to enlarge your perception of yourself and enlighten yourself and others. So what you've done is just a small experience of revealing the stories that you hold inside you.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I ever mentioned this. There's an old African saying, when an old person dies, a whole library is burned.
Yes, I was just thinking of that. Right.
So this is your library. This is one little piece of your library, and it's not going to be burned now. There it is. It's manifested. It's out there in the world. Aeneas Nin said, we write to taste life twice, once in the moment and once in retrospect.
Mm.
This is an example of tasting another aspect of your life and bringing it to life again. So I want to applaud you all for having the courage to do this. And if you want to add to your own applause to yourself, that would be a good idea too.
I'm wondering if there were people who felt it was too personal to read and wanted to talk instead about the experience of writing it. We had that possibility.
I had a different experience, but it was not because I felt it was personal, but I just didn't write. I didn't, it was, I feel for myself, I need to be in a very kind of special mood to write. And so I didn't take the invitation. I know it was an invitation. It was not something
Sure.
compulsory. It was an invitation, but I just didn't take it. And I knew it was right for everybody else. But I felt okay not taking it because I know about myself that I need to be in that kind of special mood. And what I love about all of this that we've been sharing is that for me, it's about the experience of the person. I loved what you said, Sophie, the personal in each person. And whenever I hear poetry, I wonder, oh, what's the experience of the person writing that poem, reading that poem? And that's what I feel for myself. And also when I write, it's not always for it to be seen or to be read. Many times I don't even show anybody what I write. It's just to enrich my and I don't know if it's even to enrich my experience. It's just because it's so big and it's so intense and so deep that I just need to put it into words for myself.
Mm.
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of like the page being the witness or holding my experience
Yeah.
as I write.
Yeah.
Age can be a friend or an enemy, right? It can scare us or it can be our friend.
So I wonder how this whole experience of this day has changed your perception of your own writing in any way. Why you write, how you write. What is it in writing that is inspiring for you?
Sure.
I was totally surprised because I did like a stream of consciousness and I was surprised at what I was writing. And then I was surprised when I got in the group and I realized it was supposed to be a poem. and then I thought, this isn't a poem. But then surprise is a good word. Then I was surprised at how welcoming everyone was in the room and wanted to hear it. And then they turned it into a poem. They said, this is a poem, read it again with emotion. And then I started crying as I was reading, and then I realized it was a poem. So
Wow.
I'm so grateful because you've transformed my whole relationship to this process. So thank you, Julian, for that. And thank you to my lovely Laura and Cassell. They were very sweet.
I resisted the prompt because I couldn't find anything that had a door. I couldn't think of a door that had opened. And I thought of doors shutting. I thought, oh, I've had experience with that. But then some instances came of doors opening, and that was actually very enriching. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. That will continue to be in my library.
Interestingly, two of the other two people in my triad had only 4 lines of poetry. And I was touched how much 4 lines can express both the depth and the breadth of feelings and a revelation of where they were. So it doesn't have to be, and what I took away, it doesn't have to be this lengthy explanation and a way of talking about things. It can be just 4 lines, maybe even 3, like haiku or haiku, as they say.
I think we have to stop, and I think we could go on with our experience and with what opens up for us here. Thank you so much, Julian. We really appreciate your coming and hope you come next year.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate your presence.
Thanks, Julian.
And send us the poem that you read.
I'm going to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye bye,
Thank
everybody.
Thank you.
I want to
See
say
you
something to Marianne and Gray. I want to say something to Marianne and Gray.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I think their reflections on my readings enrich my felt sense on what is being written.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
Thank
reflections enriched it and made it more. Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, Lynn. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. See you
Bye.
next week for our next writing.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you.